right, so we've been discussing cascading style sheets, and one of the things I said is that typically cascading style sheets can be applied to multiple pages. That's kind of what makes it useful. What we've been doing so far by using the style tag, this is referred to as internal CSS. Okay, it's called internal because it's literally inside of the web page. Okay. Now there's some benefits to this. One benefit is does not require an additional file. In other words, you can combine the HTML and the CSS together in one file, okay? As opposed to needing two separate files, one that would be the HTML and one that would be the CSS. So essentially, here's my HTML file, and the CSS is internal, meaning it's inside of whatever web page it is, okay? The downside of doing this this way, an internal style sheet, is, so we're saying, let's say pros and cons here. The con is CSS is specific to the web page. Now what I mean by that is if I have another HTML page, whatever I write in the style section will not affect other web pages. Okay, so CSS is specific to the web page, cannot easily be shared with other pages. All right, I shouldn't even say easily. Cannot be shared with other web pages. The other con is it makes updating the CSS for an entire website more difficult. Okay. What we're going to learn is how to create an external CSS document. Okay. First, we're just going to learn in general how to make one, and then we're going to learn how to apply it to multiple pages. So I'm going to go to exercise 3, and once again, I just have this web page here. So let's just look at it real quick before I do anything. So I have a basic page. There's an H1, there's a nav tag, there's a couple of paragraphs and a footer. And I'm just going to preview this in a browser, just like we normally do. Look something like this, okay? And what I want to do is I want to write CSS, but I'm going to write it in an external style sheet, okay? So what I need to actually do is make a new style sheet, or actually make one. I don't even have one yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure I'm just going to make a new file in my code editor, and I'm just going to save it by going to File, Save, or Command or Control S. And the main thing, and this is similar to when we talked about file management last module, we want to make sure that the HTML and the CSS file are in the same folder. Okay, so I'm putting it in the same folder as my HTML. I'm going to name my file. I'm going to call it style. You can call your file whatever you want, but like with naming HTML files, the important part with creating a cascading style sheet file or a CSS file is giving it the extension .css. Okay, that's the most important part. This extension basically tells, this .css extension tells the browser that this is a cascading style sheet file and that all the information inside of it is related to, visual structure and visual type elements here. So I'm gonna hit save. Okay. Now right now my my CSS is blank, and what am I gonna do is I'm just gonna write something basic like this. So I'm gonna say heading, and let's just make color equals red. Okay. Now the first thing you'll notice is in my style sheet here, I don't need the style tag like we were using before. Okay, the style tag is only necessary if you're doing internal, which we're not in this case. This is external. Okay, so I don't need to include that. This is a pure CSS document, so it follows all the rules that we've been talking about with CSS. I should not have any HTML in here or anything like that. Everything in here should just be this CSS syntax. Okay. Now that we're dealing with multiple files, you might want to look at your files together. So what I'm actually going to do is you can actually, if you're using Visual Studio Code, it's very easy to split this into two screens. What I'm going to do is click up here. And what that does is it actually gives me two tabs. So over here is my HTML, over here is my CSS, so that I can look at both at the same time. Okay, so here's my HTML on the left, here's my CSS on the right. By the way, if you want to go back to a single, it's very easy. You just basically click on close, and then you hit the little X in the upper right hand corner, and that gets you back to a single column view as opposed to multiple column view. So I have my CSS file here, and I have my HTML here, and I'm gonna refresh, and this is my HTML. By the way, when you make a CSS file, you have to preview the actual HTML file. You can't preview a CSS file into a browser because it has nothing to stylize. So like it's just, if you were to open it into a browser, it would just literally show you the code. It wouldn't actually render it. So I'm opening this, and you'll notice that I'm not getting anything. Okay. Now why is that happening? Well, here's the issue. Here's my HTML file. This is my CSS file right here. Okay. Even though they're both in the same folder, they're not actually talking to each other. Like here's one file, here's the HTML over here, here's the CSS. What I want them to do is to communicate with each other, because they're not currently doing that. Okay, so how can I do that? Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my HTML file. Sorry, I'm just cleaning this up a little bit. And what I'm going to do is, let's put the CSS here for a moment. I want to connect this file to this file. Okay, or I want to connect my HTML to my CSS. How do we do that? Well, what we can do is in the head section, I'm going to use a new tag, and it's called the link tag. Okay. What the link tag does is it links your HTML file to your CSS file. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to type in link. Okay. For the link tag to work, we actually need two attributes, HTML attributes. The first is called rel. Rel is short for relative. Basically what this is doing is telling the browser what kind of file are we linking to this HTML file, because the browser doesn't defaultly know. It could be programming, it could be other stuff. In this case, we want to put in style sheet, which basically is letting the browser know we're connecting a CSS style sheet. The other attribute is href, and that is where is the CSS document. Okay. Now in this case they're in the same folder, so I can just type in the name of the file here. If they were in separate folders, once again we'd have to do that file management thing where we, go in between folders and subfolders and things like that. Okay. I'm going to say style.css. Okay. This is a one-sided or empty or void tag, meaning I don't need a closing tag. Now that I've done this, and make sure that the link tag is in the head section, okay? Now that I've done that, this is connected this to this, and if I went to go back, you can see that this now works. So whatever I write in my CSS document is going to affect my HTML page. So if I came over here, let's just kind of play around with some of the other stuff we've talked about today. So let's do font family, and I'm going to do courier, and I'm going to take the p tag, and I don't know, let's do green for the color, and font size 12 points, line height, which is the space between my lines, 16 points maybe. I'm going to take the links and use text decoration to remove the default underline. So I'll say text decoration none. And let's make the color red too. So here's my page. So let's refresh, and you can see everything got affected. Okay, everything that I wrote here is now affecting my HTML page. Okay, let's move forward. All right, so I'm going to move on to exercise 4. Here I have 3 files, one about San Francisco, one about Chicago, one in New York. I'm just going to preview the first one. Okay. Each page kind of follows the same general pattern of, like, there's a city and there's a couple of paragraphs and there's some links about famous sites in that city, and I can kind of go between them. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, you know, a lot of times when we write or we're creating a website, we want the visuals to look the same web page to web page, right? We wouldn't want it that if on one page the background color, or, you know, the text color is green and then on the next web page it's blue. That would create a sense of inconsistency and people may not know that they're related pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build one single external CSS document, and then what I'm going to do is share it between all of the pages. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to save it. Once again, where you save the file matters, and I'm just going to save it into the same folder as the 3 files, and I'm just going to call it cities.css. Okay, and let's just start off. I'm once again going to do like an H1, and let's do a color red. And let's load in this HTML. So I'm doing it, and you'll notice it's not affecting this, right? Once again, so here's my file, here's my CSS. And I'll do a little 2-column setup here. So what I'm trying to do is connect my HTML file here to my CSS file over here. Remember that the way that we do that is defaultly the HTML and the CSS don't talk to each other. I need them to get them to communicate with each other, to talk with each other, to share information. More importantly, this style sheet has to share its style information to the HTML file. So what I'm going to do is go into the head section, remember, and we're going to use that link tag I talked about. So it's link, rel, style sheet, which basically means, hey browser, what are you linking? Or the browser's like, hey, what are you linking? I'm saying, this is a style sheet. And then I need to say the name of the file. Once again, files are case sensitive. So if it's up, you know, if it's capital C, it's capital C. If it's lowercase c, it's lowercase c. I'm going to type in cities.css. Let's go back. Boom. Okay, so now it's working. And so now that I got that to work, I can, you know, start to just kind of stylize things the way that I want. I'll do font family. I'm going to do Arial Black. I'll set up a backup of maybe like Arial, and then maybe just a category type of sans serif. If you don't know what sans serif is, don't worry. This is something we're going to talk more about later. These are more just general. Those are more just general design concepts of typography. They're not specific to web development or computer science or anything. Let's play around with size, so font size. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And you can, by the way, if you want to do other stuff, you know, I don't know, let's do text transform. You know, feel free to put in whatever you want. That's the whole point of these, is just to kind of play around. Uppercase. There you go. Let's play around with the paragraphs. Color dark gray. Font size 14. Line height, which is the space between my lines, 20 maybe? See how that looks. Use it a little darker. This might be where I use like a hexadecimal. A little darker there. That's a little better. And I'm going to style the hyperlinks. So text decoration. I'm going to set them to none, and let's just, I'm going to make them red too. And let's make it italic. Font style, italic. Okay. So here's my page, looking good. Now what I want to do is, I'm going to click on Chicago. And you're going to notice that I'm not getting the same style here. Okay. Now, why is that? Well, let's open up the Chicago file. And the reason why I'm not getting it is, so, San Francisco, or, the SF page was connected to our CSS document. Okay. So I've created the CSS document. We attached, the SF page to the CSS, but the Chicago, although it exists, it's not connected to this yet. Okay. So what I need to do is connect Chicago to CSS. How do I do that? Same way we did it for San Francisco. So I want to go into the head section here. And let's do link rel equals style sheet href equals cities.css. All right, so now that I've done that, it's connected this document. So if I click on it now, you can see it's following the same style that San Francisco is. If I go to New York, you see I'm getting the same issue. So, I need to, or, I have my New York City page. I need to connect it to the CSS document here. So I'm actually just going to be a little lazy. I'm just going to copy this, go here, and let's just paste that in. Okay. Assuming that I did it correctly, everything is now following the same visual style here. So the benefit of this is it is easy to quickly apply visual styles. So in other words, like, I didn't have to go and rewrite anything. I didn't have to rewrite the H1 and all that. Basically, once I attached it, it already kind of came with a bunch of built-in styles, right? I had one for the heading and the paragraphs and the links and all that sort of stuff. So it saved me a lot of time while keeping my look generally consistent. Here's another reason why you might want to use external style sheet as opposed to an internal. And the reason why is it is easy to modify or quickly edit multiple web pages. So I want you guys to remember what we did back at the beginning of the video. Remember how, like, we could apply styles or visual effects to a web page using HTML tags, right? There was like the font tag and there's like that body background thing, right? The problem with that is if I was to use, say, BG color, it only affects that one page. And then if I wanted to affect multiple pages, I'd have to literally go and update many pages, right? And if you're a website that has a lot of pages, that's a real pain to have to do that. So let's say I have a client, okay? I'm showing my client my work. And clients being clients, they want to make changes because that's just what they do. So my client looks and it goes, look, okay, I like this. Instead of using red, why don't we use purple? And instead of using Arial Black, let's use Courier. I want the body text to be a little bit smaller, so I think it's 14. Let's make it 10. And let's put a underline underneath the, hyperlinks, okay? So if this was done via HTML tags, I'd have to literally go into every single page and make manual changes. But because all three pages are following the rules of the CSS, if I make any change to the CSS here, it's going to automatically update in all connected pages. So I'm going to go back, and let's just go back to that CSS. So I'm just going to go in, they talked about changing this from red to purple. Okay, did that. And we're going to switch the font here to Courier. Courier is what we call a monospaced font. Don't worry if you don't know what that is. That's not really the point of this particular thing. But if you know, hey, use it. They wanted the text to be a little bit smaller, so let's make that, and let's lower the line height to 15. And let's do underline. Okay. So I saved my changes here, and then now if I go back, not only does it affect San Francisco, it affects all of my pages. So you can see why this could be really, why this is really handy if I was working for a website, or I was working on a website, if I wanted to make multiple changes, if I change the CSS, I can automatically affect any web page that's connected to it, and that's going to save me a lot of time. Okay. A couple more things about CSS. One is, let's talk about comments. So we talked about comments for HTML, I think a couple classes ago. So if we remember, for HTML, a comment is something like this. It's right-facing bracket, exclamation point, hyphen, hyphen, and then to close the comment would be hyphen, hyphen, left-facing angle bracket. Okay, now that's for HTML. This is HTML comment. Meaning I wrote this here on line 22, and if I was to preview this page, this is exercise 6. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. You'll notice that this comment doesn't preview, right? Now that is for HTML. CSS has its own syntax. I actually have a connected CSS document to this. It's called style.css. It's right here. The reason why you would add a comment to CSS is a lot of the same reason why you would add one in HTML. It's usually used to write little notes to yourself or help other programmers understand what you're doing. So here it's I've sort of set the font color here for a lot of things, and then I set up the typeface here, and then I got a style tag. So what I might do is I'm going to add a comment here so I can remember what all of this code does. So the way you make a comment in CSS is it's /*, and then to close it is */. Okay. So the way I like to think of it is I like to think of this like a sandwich. These are the bread and the star is the meat, like a meatball. So it's bread, meatball, meatball, bread. Okay. And you can type whatever you want here. So I might put font color, just so I can remember what this does. And then I'm going to come here, typefaces. Okay. If you want to quickly do this in Visual Studio Code, you can do Command or Control forward, and it automatically will do it for you as such. Here's something, you don't have to do it, I like to do it. I like to put a couple of equal signs here. I think it makes it easier to read. Just kind of notice things. You don't have to do it, it's up to you. But and I might even put a little comment here. So I'm going to say, let's say I want to put an author to this CSS, David Hurwitz, pub date, September 2022. Let's preview this page. Actually, it's already there. So let's refresh, and if I go to inspect, here's my HTML comment. And if you actually go to sources, you can actually click on the CSS file, and you can actually see my comments there. Okay. Let's actually, I don't know, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to see if there's any comments in the CSS for Chabot's website. I've not looked at it, so there might not be any. Yeah, looks like I'm getting a lot of HTML here. This is for a plugin. So yeah, no, that's not a comment. Those are just, here's a comment right here. These are from some special effects. So it's basically kind of just letting you know what the effect does. Here's a lightbox effect. Usually this is for when you click on something and it the background dims and things. So there's a little comment there. So you're going to see this from time to time. Usually people use it to make small comments to other people, give information, things like that. Make it easier to understand. Okay. All right, last thing I'm going to talk about is we've talked a lot today about using CSS to format text, things like color, font style, bold or italic. We can also stylize lists, unordered lists or ordered lists. So this is exercise 5. You can see here I have an unordered list, that's a bulleted list, and an ordered list. So I'm going to right click, All right, I'm just going to blow this up a little bit. Here's my unordered list. Here's my ordered list. You could actually write CSS to style this. So what I'm going to do is, if you type in UL, I'm selecting the unordered list. And we're going to use something called list style type. List style type allows you to set what type of bullet you're going to have. So for an unordered list, I could use square. That would give me square bullets. You can see these turn to square. I could use what are called circle bullets. Circle bullets are empty bullets. If you want a solid circle, that would be called a disk, which is also typically the default for most browsers. Or if you want, you could just set it to none. None means no bullets. Okay, so now you can see there's no bullets here. And I could do the same thing for an ordered list, or an OL. It's also list style type. Instead of saying whether you want square, circle, or disk bullets, you can say whether you want upper alpha, upper Roman, lower Roman, or decimal. Upper alpha would be using capital letters. Alpha means alphanumeric, like ABC. So this would mean I'm getting ABC using capital letters. If I use lower alpha, lowercase letters, ABC, D. I could use upper Roman. Upper Roman would be using Roman numerals. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I could use lower Roman. Use lower Roman numerals. Finally, if you want to use numbers, that would be decimal. Decimal is typically the default for most browsers. So that would let me do numbers. Alright, so why don't you guys try that out. That's setting up external CSS, applying it to multiple pages, creating comments in CSS, and stylizing lists.